Hi everyone, we're just giving everyone a couple of minutes to join us, so we'll start in a few minutes' time.
We have a message in the chat.
Yeah. Simone, can you hear us now?
Testing. Speak. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Oh. Oh.
Good. So it looks maybe it's Simona. Maybe something at your end, Simona.
Oh yeah. Looks like she suggested coming off and coming back on. Okay. Just give it another minute and then I think we can make a start. Oh, can you hear us now? So let's just join again. I think we. Oh, right. Okay. So I think we can make a start, and then if other people join us, they can join us.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Simone. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ruth Wilcox. I'm Professor of Biomedical Engineering at the University of Leeds, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Arun and Simone, this afternoon. Arun is a Business Development Manager looking after medical technologies at the University of Leeds, and Simone is the Operations Manager for the Place-Based Impact Acceleration account. I'm just having a quick look in the chat just to double check that everyone can hear. I think we seem to be sorted now, which is great. So we're going to make a start. This afternoon's webinar is related to our Place-Based Impact Acceleration account, or PBIAA for short. And today we're going to be focusing particularly on the proof of market and proof of feasibility studies and talking through some support for those as we get towards the next application deadline. So our aim is to support proof of market and proof of feasibility applicants, helping you to make strong applications and to help you navigate a little bit of different elements of the application form. So I'm going to start off and talk a little bit about the scope of the calls, and then Arun is going to go in a bit more detail about what makes a compelling opportunity and value proposition, some of the key intellectual property considerations. I'll talk a little bit about some examples of previous awards to give a flavour on the types of things and the level of detail in those particular applications, and a little bit about the follow-on plans and thinking beyond the PBIAA as well. So between us, hopefully we'll cover all of the sections in the application form. At the end, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. If you have any thoughts as you're going through, please drop questions into the meeting chat, and then Simone is going to help us to navigate those at the end, and hopefully everyone leaves knowing a little bit more about what they need to be putting into their application. So I'm going to start with a bit of an overview of the scheme itself to put this into context, and hopefully this will be fairly familiar to most of you if you've seen the call documentations. But the aim of the EPSRC place-based impact acceleration accounts are to support activities that accelerate impact, particularly from engineering and physical sciences research, being this is funded by the EPSRC. They funded a number of PBIAAs around the country, each with a thematic focus around an industrial cluster. In the first round of calls that we were successful with, we were one of 10 schemes supported nationally. There's subsequently been another call. There's now about 20 schemes coming into operation. We were awarded £5.2 million over 4 years to support impact projects and knowledge exchange activities. And these, in our particular call, are all related to medical technologies in the Yorkshire region. So that's what our particular focus is around. And I've talked around this a little bit, but really the aim of these, all of these accounts, is to enhance the capabilities of a industry cluster and drive regional economic growth. So we know that in the Yorkshire region, there's already an established industry cluster around medical technologies. And our aim here is to drive the growth of that by supporting the acceleration of university-related research, particularly in the engineering and physical sciences, into eventual products and services in medical technologies. So within our scheme, a large proportion of funding is being divided up and given out as what we call impact funding in 3 different sizes of package, if you like, from proof of market, which are up to 10k, proof of feasibility, which are up to 20k, and then the larger proof of concepts, which are up to 100k. So here we're focusing particularly on the proof of market and the proof of feasibility funding. Across all of those types of funding, the idea is that the funding must be for projects that are related to medical technologies, because that's what our place-based IAA is all around. And then we have some more specific aspects of the scope. One question that we get asked quite a bit is, well, how do you define medical technologies? That is a challenge because it's a little bit woolly around the edges, but broadly it's around devices, tools and machines used to save or improve people's lives. And just to emphasize, it does not extend to drugs, so not to biopharmaceuticals, and not to the types of wellness and fitness devices that might be available to the general public that don't have a specific medical purpose. And then we have some specifics for our scope set out by the funder. So at least 50% of each project needs to be broadly in that engineering and physical sciences area, so within the EPSRC remit. And there's a link in the call to the EPSRC website where that remit is set out in more detail. They must support growth in the Yorkshire region and in the medical technologies sector. So I know there's maybe a few applicants that are outside of the region, and everyone across the UK is welcome to apply, but there must be a case made that this will support economic growth in the Yorkshire region. That's the premise of the place-based IAA. We can't use the funds for IP protection, so we can't use some of your impact funding to support a patent, but you can use it to explore the IP landscape within a particular area, but just we can't actually fund the patents itself through this funding. And again, that's a stipulation of the EPSRC. And finally, the funding must be led by a member of staff at a UK higher education authority establishment, so a university in the UK. Again, this is a requirement of the EPSRC. We're supporting research that originated, if you like, within the higher education sector. So, as I said today, we're going to focus on two types of call, the proof of market and the proof of feasibility. So the proof of market, which also covers due diligence projects as well, is up to £10,000. It's for small initial pieces of work to establish a market or clinical need. So that could include market research, competitor technology analysis, as I've already mentioned, IP reviews, or studies to obtain external commercial, clinical, or patients' opinions. So really to set the scene, if you like, and we'll talk, as I said, in a bit more detail about some examples of those types of projects. And then our second level up is the proof of feasibility projects. So these are up to £40,000. And these are activities to demonstrate the feasibility of a technology concept, initial prototype development and testing, or ensuring a technology is designed to meet user demands from the outset. So slightly more involved in the proof of market, really demonstrating through a prototype, for example, that the project is feasible as a medical technologies device. I'm going to pass to Arun now, who's going to dig in a little bit more detail about these different schemes and what to consider in the application forms.
Thank you, Ruth. So yeah, I want to touch a bit on what is the importance of proof of market. So before investing years and millions in developing a new medical device, we have to ask this fundamental question. Does the market truly need this solution, and will the buyers like NHS pay for the solution? So proof of market is the evidence that a real addressable demand exists for the innovation. And to frame our regulatory strategy and market access strategy, we need a strong POM. And usually universities, tend to file patents when they're convinced that there's a good market opportunity for the innovation. And of course, we have a very highly competitive and regulated medtech sector. So POM is, or proof of market, is an early validation of the clinical and market need of the solution. And de-risk, you can almost play bingo with the word de-risk in your medtech innovation journey. And this is one of the key factors for the external investments like the VC investments or any other external investments. So POM reduces the risk of costly failures by aligning research and development and commercialization with the real world demand and reimbursement realities. And we have around 500,000 plus products globally, which means that market validation is essential for success. So the bottom line is POM is not just a checkbox, it's the foundation for a successful, sustainable medtech innovation. As per a recent report, 42% of the startups fail because there's no need for their solution. So if you can, I would suggest, doing a 3-month secondment in the hospital setting. So PBIAA can fund such secondments so that you can identify the unmet clinical needs and have those early patient engagement. It's good to cultivate that mindset of an empathy-driven innovator. Next slide, please. Thank you, Ruth. So the PBIAA proof of market applications should include a project overview, which is a short, non-confidential lay summary of the project. This will be placed on the PBIAA website if the application is successful. And then the opportunity. So here you have to state the specific clinical or operational problem that your device addresses. Describe the consequence of the problem for the patients, clinicians, and the system, and quantify the burden where possible. For example, cost to the NHS, patient outcomes. So you have to write your need statement. You'll see the example here. So in the example, you can see the clinical problem, the population affected, and how your solution is the problem. What is the growth rate of the problem, including, you can look at compounded annual growth rate, CAGR rate, if possible, and what are the current market trends? Is it favorable or negative for your innovation? And the territories where the clinical need is prevalent. And it's good to do some patient and clinician engagement and literature search to formulate the need statement. For the proof of feasibility applications, you have to describe the device or technology and its intended purpose and the likely users. Value proposition is explains how a proposed solution delivers superior value with evidence and specifics to all relevant stakeholders. So the example here, it's a one statement, but you can see how different values are compressed into one statement. I'll detail the value proposition in the next slide. So for the proof of feasibility projects, please evidence previous proof of market analysis you have conducted. For the underpinning science and research, you have to demonstrate the science and research you have done to date prior to the PBIAA funding and explain who has funded those previous works and value of those grants. You need to provide a clear, realistic plan for your POM activities with a detailed cost breakdown for the required resources. The IP part is very important. And so we have had a good number of applications where the IP part is not clear. So what you have to do is you have to mention the current solutions and competitors, explain how your innovation is differentiated and what value it brings. If new IP has been created, explain the steps performed to date to protect it. So you have to ask this question: do you have the freedom to operate? Sometimes, at the POM stage, you will be gathering data on the freedom to operate space. So the POM will be about looking at different patents and see how to add value or how your devices are different or unique. So these are all, as Ruth mentioned, these are all academic-led projects, which means that the funds must not be used to develop the IP of an external company. So this is to develop the university IP or the academics IP. And where there are external partners, you need to explain any arrangements relating to the foreground IP and who will own the foreground IP. And you need to have a summary of the background IP brought into the project. And of course, always let your commercialization team know about the project, have some initial conversations regarding the IP. So patent is one form of IP, but there are other forms of IP. So you need to be aware of all those different forms, and understand the TTO or the commercialization process from your team, from your commercialization team for these early stage innovations, and always speak to your TTO before publishing anything IP sensitive. And in the next steps part, you can outline the questions that would still need to be addressed following this funding and your plan for follow-on funding. If this work is successful, you can mention that you'll be applying for POF funding after your POM. You can outline your strategy for reaching customers, including key partners and any regulatory or reimbursement considerations you have made. And you can mention any future grants you'll be applying for. You'll also need to show that your team has the capacity to deliver the works. Team sometimes lacks the necessary expertise to undertake the market assessments. In that case, they get external market research agencies to do that POM work. So another good point is it's good to show that if there's any ongoing conversation with clinicians for the project, and then for the proof of feasibility project, it's good to show if you have already started any engagement with external companies who can be your commercialization partner. It's better if they are based in Yorkshire so that you can show the regional impact. And of course, as Ruth mentioned, you need to show the economic impact to the Yorkshire region. Even if the external partner is outside the Yorkshire region, if they have plans to set up a base here in Yorkshire, you can still mention that as an economic impact. For the proof of market and proof of feasibility projects, you don't need to have an industry collaborator, but for the proof of feasibility projects, it's good to show that you have started engaging with your potential commercialization partner. So in summary, a well-prepared application not only demonstrates the need for your innovation, but also shows that you understand the market dynamics, competition, and pathways to adoption, laying the groundwork for successful MedTech translation. Next slide, please. Thanks, Ruth. So now these are the different values your device can add. In the value proposition part, you should clearly outline how your innovation compares to the existing solutions or standard care or gold standard treatments. highlight the improvements in patient outcomes, reductions in resource use, or other measurable benefits over current practice. You can divide the stakeholders and show the value to each stakeholders. Like for patients, it can be improved outcomes, experience, non-invasive procedures, or convenience. For the clinicians, it can be workflow, usability, clinical benefit. And of course, for the payers like NHS, what is the cost impact? What are the resource savings, system level impact? So you should demonstrate how your device delivers value for money across the patient pathway, not just at the point of care. Show the potential savings if you can. So it's not easy to find all this data, but show the potential savings, efficiency gains, or improved outcomes that justify adoption and support reimbursement by NHS or others. And if relevant, you can also discuss how this technology aligns with the NHS priorities. Next slide, please. So typical POM outcomes are you'll have your clinical need and market need validated. So this confirms that a genuine unmet clinical or operational need exists, supported by stakeholder feedback and market data. You'll have identified the total addressable market where your customers are and the demographics. And the market size and opportunity should be delivered. So this quantifies the addressable market, identifies key customer strengths, evaluates the commercial potential for the innovation. Competitive landscape analysis is very important. So this gives a clear understanding of existing solutions, who the major players are, competitive strengths and weaknesses, and how your device differentiates itself. There'll be an initial analysis of the patents, and you should gather the data on the freedom to operate. Stakeholder insights is very important. So it's good to do some preliminary research to gather perspectives from clinicians, patients, payers, and maybe procurement teams to ensure that this solution aligns with the real world priorities and validate the demand. So next slide, please. So there can be, three angles to or three works in feasibility project. So technical feasibility, where you demonstrate that the core technology can be engineered to meet the desired requirements and perform its intended function. So ideally, you can build some early prototypes and test it to validate performance and reliability. Commercial feasibility assesses whether the device can be manufactured at scale at an acceptable cost, and whether there is a viable pathway to market adoption and profitability. So you need to think about the different angles of commercialization. So manufacturability is a big thing in medtech innovation. So you need to have some thoughts or considerations about that. Operational feasibility considers whether the device can be integrated into existing healthcare workflows and systems, and whether it can be produced and distributed effectively. So that's in short from my side. Over to you, Ruth.
Thanks very much, Arun. So just to flesh this out a bit, we'll go through a few examples of proof of market and then proof of feasibility projects. These first two examples are ones that we sort of dreamt up when we were putting the bid together to sort of help to give flavour to this. But actually, we've had a few. So these were hypothetical, but actually we've had a few actual examples that fit into very similar categories. So the first one is around a new biomaterial. So it's been identified through an EPSRC funded project. So it's definitely in remit. It has some characteristics that would be beneficial for a specific medical application. So to take this further, the proof of market requested funding to perform patent searches, but as I said, not the patent application. So to survey the IP landscape and to fund some clinical liaison with key clinical opinion leaders to identify really the clinical need and drill down into whether there was interest for this. So going back to Arun's point that he was making just now, ensuring that there is a clinical drive before taking this further forward. So that was example number one. A second example, a new medical device of some description developed via a school-funded PhD student, so not directly funded by the EPSRC. That's absolutely fine as long as it's still within EPSRC remits. And this medical device has potential to improve surgical outcomes. So it's perhaps a surgical aid that goes alongside some surgical technique. Here, the proof of market funding was requested to use an external consultant to map out the regulatory requirements for this new technology and to conduct an initial market analysis. So in other words, to prove that there was a market out there for such a technology. Perhaps just something to emphasize here, which Arun referred to as well, is the use of an external consultant. And that's absolutely fine. And I think we particularly recommend that with some of these proof of market types of study, that the expertise may well not sit in your academic group, and you need to go out to a consultant that has expertise in this field, particularly for kind of regulatory requirements and so on. That's fine. If you're having trouble in finding someone suitable, then do give us a shout. We have links to quite a few project partners that were part of our original EPSRC bid that work in this space, and our bids so far have worked with a number of external consultants. So that could be, it could be that all 10K in fact go out to an external consultant, and that's a perfectly legitimate use of the money. A third example, so this is an actual example from our first round of proof of markets. This is around a new generation of macromolecular probe. So some quite basic science had been performed already through the previous research, and identified or developed a probe that could discriminate between cells and tissues by comparing the density of the marker molecules present. It has a lot of potential, but quite a wide range of medical applications that it could be used in, such as disease monitoring and diagnosis. So this first proof of market study was around establishing what would be the best lead application to go. What's the lowest hanging fruit that we should be trying to take forwards through this work, and to develop the IP strategy through that. Again, surveying the IP landscape in that area. Is there some uniqueness here that could form a patent application, and to use sort of this to inform the route towards commercialization. So those are three examples of proof of market. If we move on to the proof of feasibility examples, and we'll start with the kind of the two examples that we had previously in the proof of market, and then take these to the next stage so you can see how the proof of market might then lead on to a proof of feasibility. So if we go back to that biomaterial identified through an EPSRC project, after a proof of market, there might now be clear evidence of market need. So the next stage would be to request proof of feasibility funding to develop a prototype delivery system or device for this biomaterial. That's, for example, it could be an injectable biomaterial, so we need a delivery system to be able to inject it, and to perform some initial biocompatibility studies to show that this is going to meet the very basic biocompatibility regulatory requirements. And alongside that, perform wider patient engagement piece to understand really the patient needs for this particular application, and whether that needs to be taken into account, for example, in the way in which the surgery is performed, that would govern how this biomaterial was delivered. So that's example one. Example two was the new medical device developed by PhD students. If that had then gone through a proof of market study that had demonstrated its commercial potential, then a proof of feasibility study might be requested to make a demonstrator of that device that could be taken out of the lab and showcased to clinicians. So if you like, a prototype, maybe not fully working, but something that could be shown to clinicians so they could see how this would work in practice. do this at a local teaching hospital, get their opinion on the usability of the device and what modifications might be required prior to going into clinical trials, so that the device could then be manufactured in its final form. So it's the kind of the user requirements for that device that are being taken into account there. And then a final example here, which is, again, this is a real proof of feasibility project that we funded in the last round, was around co-designing a handheld device that measures sleep readiness, particularly for, this is focused on hospitalized children, and it used music to support the induction of sleep. So the previous research had all been undertaken and established that the approaches to measure sleep readiness, the device had the approaches necessary to measure sleep readiness and also to support the induction of sleep. But this further proof of feasibility was then requested to work with the users, so in this case with the children in a hospital setting, to really fully define the needs and requirements, and then use that to further develop the device, to tweak the device, if you like, in accordance with that feedback, and then test the feasibility of this kind of optimized device, if you like, to support sleep onset and quality. So hopefully that's given you a little bit more flavour of the types of funding, but and also perhaps shown the breadth over which we go with this. So it may be that you have examples that are very different to those seen, and again, I'd encourage you to just look at what we're asking for on the application form, and it doesn't have to be in one of the categories that I've just shown in these examples. So just a bit of a summary then, in terms of considering your applications now. Firstly, I would recommend just having a really thorough read through the call documents. Again, all of the requirements and the scope are set out in more detail there. And I think one area where we've seen perhaps limited evidence is making sure that you're clear on how your project will benefit the region, so the Yorkshire region, and indeed your university as well within that. I put in brackets longer term because this is very early stage, particularly the proof of market, but project forwards, how could this have benefit to the region in the longer term? I'd really encourage you to talk to your research support teams, that could be your tech transfer or your commercialization teams, make them aware of the application, get their advice, particularly around IP, and that's really important, and get their support in helping you to understand whether you have freedom to operate and what your IP approach might be. Depending on whether you're applying for proof of market or proof of feasibility, you might be a different point along that IP journey, but wherever you are, I'd really encourage you to have those conversations early with your tech transfer teams. I've already mentioned this, but consider using external organisations, especially for the proof of markets, to get that external bespoke medtech expertise, because really it is quite a specific sector, particularly around aspects like regulation, the length of time it takes to translate, and so on. And so we don't expect all universities, or definitely not all academics, to have that understanding. So use the funding to go out to external organisations that can support you with that. And finally, a point that Arun mentioned as well is to think about what is next. You might be early on in your journey, but there is a section in the report, in the application, that asks you to present your follow-on plans. So if you're applying for proof of market, is the next stage going to be proof of feasibility and then proof of concept? Can you see how this will progress? What funders you might be looking for? Again, it might be the PBIAA team for the next stage, or it might be elsewhere. And by the proof of feasibility stage, have you started to engage with perhaps companies if you're thinking about a licensing route and so on? So as I said, although it's early days, make sure you're clear that you've got a plan going forwards, even if you need further evidence through the proof of market or through the proof of feasibility to be able to prove that out. Okay, I think that's it in terms of what we've got to present to you, but now an opportunity really for any questions that myself, Arun and Simone will attempt to answer.
feel free to pop your hand up or write some questions in the chat.
I think there's some typing going on, so we shall pause for a moment and
yeah.
make the questions.
I've also enabled everyone's microphone, so if you do put your hand up, feel free to chip in and unmute.
So, question in the chat: can research staff be the main applicant? Sorry, I meant to mention that. Yes, that's absolutely fine. So, if there's postdoctoral staff, for example, in fact, we would absolutely encourage that. We really want to help support the next generation coming through along this translation pathway as well. If you are not a permanent member of academic staff, we do ask that you have a co-investigator who is a permanent member of academic staff. That's just to kind of secure, if, for example, your contract finishes and you move off somewhere else, or you get a better job elsewhere, that this piece of work can continue. So someone just to support you with that.
Another question: is it mandatory to involve an external clinical specialist for a proof of feasibility project? Is it okay to just have an internal clinical expert within the university?
I think that would depend very much on the project. If internally there was a clinical expert that can provide you with everything that you need, then yes, that's absolutely fine. I think it's always good to have a bit of a plan for how you're going to widen out those. So in terms of clinical expertise, perhaps you want to think about, for example, contacting some key opinion leaders in the area and getting a broader view of the clinical need, or perhaps if it's a kind of more of a user engagement, to get more than one view of whether, for example, your prototype does what you think what you're hoping it will do. So it would depend a bit on the project, but if you can justify that you've got all you need internally, that's absolutely fine.
Steve, you've got your hand up.
Steve, can you unmute? You've got your hand up, or do you want to pop something in the chat? Aha, perfect.
Hey.
Oh, is that better?
Yes, that's it. We can hear you.
Yeah. So it's a question about B7, on intellectual property. I'm only looking at the proof of market award anyway, but I do have an external partner who are not in Yorkshire, and worst of all, they're in Manchester. But it's about this question about explaining any arrangements relating to foreground IP. I mean, I can write. To be honest, we haven't got any arrangements. We haven't got anything legal written down or anything for me to refer to. But I have got an external partner. Any sort of ideas on dealing with that?
Yeah, so I think usually you need to have a collaboration agreement with these external companies if you want to formalize. And
it's not a company, sorry, it's an academic partner from the University of Manchester. It's just an engineer I work with, basically.
I mean, that's absolutely fine, and indeed we'd encourage having collaborations with the most appropriate people wherever they are. Just make sure that there is a clear case that this will bring economic benefit to the Yorkshire region in the longer term. But it's absolutely fine to have academic collaborators from across the country. That's in fact encouraged to get the best to be working with you.
Yeah, and then if your exit strategy is, if it's spin out, if it's based in Yorkshire, that's an economic impact. Or in future, if you collaborate with an industry partner based in Yorkshire or even from outside Yorkshire, if they want to set up a base here in Yorkshire, that creates jobs and there is another economic impact.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I may have another question coming through in the chat.
Does the proof of feasibility need to show all information that's provided by proof of market? Can this market analysis be on the device itself, or should it also cover the potential market share for the medical sector?
So I guess your proof of feasibility does need to show that you've got evidence of the proof of market for your device, I suppose. If there is nothing, if there are sort of similar devices on the market already, then you can use some evidence from that for sure to show the market share of that type of device, if you like. But in that case, you then want to demonstrate what would differentiate your device from what's already out there, and how you could grab some components of that market share. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit dependent on exactly what kind of evidence you have. But at the end of the day, you want to show that for your device that you're going to be translating, that there will be a market there for that particular device when it reaches the stage where it can be commercialized. Arun, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to the total addressable market, so which means who your customers are. So of course, there can be other products in the market, and you can look at their, market share, and if you can tap into that market, which is already existing, because yours is unique and better than the existing one. So you need to have that data to show that yours is better, and you can tap into that market, and then you need to have an idea about what is the total addressable market. That's the word they use in the proof of market. So you need to find that out.
Anyone have any other questions? Getting pretty quiet.
Maybe one more coming through in the chat. As far as that's coming, if you go away, you still have questions later, do get in touch with ourselves at PBIAA@leeds.ac.uk. We will try and cover off or pass any questions to the most relevant person to be able to answer.
Steve, do you want to come in?
Just a quick one. Do we know there's going to be another round in 6 months?
Yes, there absolutely will be. So yes, we have funding for 4 years in total. We've just completed year 1. So the calls will start to diminish as we get towards sort of the middle of year 3, because we'll be running out of time to actually get the funding out the door at that point. But certainly for the rest of this year, there'll be another call and another call early next year as well.
Okay. Oh. Yes, we have.
When Bing said.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon. Yeah. So just a quick question. When can we expect the result of this round?
That's always a good question.
It is a good question. I don't mind answering that. We will be meeting as a panel the week commencing, well, it'll actually be Friday the 27th that we'll be meeting next month. And then the results will be communicated the week after. So you'll find out pretty swiftly after we've met.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
It is worth saying that quite often the panel have some additional questions. So it's agreed that it's fundable, but we just need to find out about this or this, or if you can show this, then we can fund it. So it's not unusual for us to come back with some further questions, and then we take that to just the executive group, so it doesn't go back out to the full panel, to just check that those answers are in line with what we were expecting, and if so, then award the funding. So there can be a bit of backwards and forwardsing after the panel.
Okay, yeah, just another question. Sorry about that. Do we need to involve a clinic, partner if this product is already clinically proven?
I would say yes, because you be wanting to show why your product is in some way superior to what's already out there. I guess it goes back to Arun's point about the market for this. And so yeah, I would imagine that you would want to have a clinical partner on board for that. I think if you didn't, you'd have to make a good case as to why that wasn't appropriate, if you see what I mean. I think in most cases we'd probably be asking, how do you know that there's the clinical need for this, and what's going to make your device or whatever it is, as I said, in some way displace something that's already out there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
We've had
we have a question from Davey. It's about what level should be achieved for POF. So we need to have the proof of market data before applying for proof of feasibility. So the proof of market will include, your market data, your competitor analysis, IP landscape, the bits we have mentioned in the proof of market part. So all the outcomes of proof of market will be required for the proof of feasibility application.
And then I think there's also part of this question about what level should the innovation be at after POF has been done. So would taking it to preclinical validation be okay?
I think this depends a lot on the technology, and this is kind of a bit of the challenge that we have, that we're working across sort of everything from implants to diagnostics to sleep aid you had earlier. So really it would depend on how involved that preclinical validation is. We might have proof of concepts that are part of the preclinical evaluation, for example, an animal study if it was an implant. So we wouldn't expect that at proof of feasibility stage. But yeah, I think it depends a little bit on how much preclinical evidence would be necessary for that device, which is about thinking a little bit about, if it's going to be regulated, what kind of a regulatory pathway might there be for that device, and what evidence would you need?
And it's also good to have some user engagement to understand what the user requirements are, and you need to bring in that human factors and economics into your prototyping, and at this stage it's good to have that user engagement and clinician engagement as well.
I think we've got another question coming. Should the competitor analysis be mainly covering Yorkshire, or should it be broader? For example,
it should be broader. So we are looking at the global market. So your clinical need may not be prevalent in UK. It can be somewhere else. So you need to identify where the real market is, and then your competitors again can be from different parts of the world. So when it comes to patentability, even if they are from outside UK, that becomes an issue. So you need to have a good idea about who the major players are from across the globe, and it can also be pipeline projects of these companies. So you need to have that dig into the pipeline of those companies and how that relates, or how is that similar to yours. So in short, it should be beyond UK.
Okay.
Maybe have one more coming through.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I guess just to emphasize again, do get in touch if you have any further questions. We're keen to get the top quality applications in, so we're really happy to try and support you in getting your bids together.
Okay, I think we can wrap it up. So thanks everyone for joining us. If you do have any questions, as Ruth said earlier, contact us via PBIAA@leeds.ac.uk, and best of luck with your applications.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
I think Paul is typing. Is that a question or thanks? Oh, that's thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.